Jaguar. Pope John the Third governed during the Lombard invasions. How can a spiritual leader guide people through chaos and external threats? Jaguar, yes, Gurudev says, in times of fear, be the lighthouse. John the didn't run or retaliate, he anchored. Sudarshan Kriya builds this resilience in leaders, making bread the bridge between panic and poise. He served with unwavering calm and divine trust. He was like Krishna in Kurukshetra, guiding silently amidst war. Trikal Sandhya kept him anchored in cosmic time, not temporal fear. Through Agnikaram, he offered the fear and created spiritual protection. His very silence was our kavach. Pope Benedict I led amid famine and war. What inner practices empower leaders to nourish a starving society? Gurudev reminds us wherever there is service, there is abundance. Benedict gave from scarcity and opened channels of grace. Daily Padma Sadhana and Seva purify poverty consciousness. He embodied the Yajna spirit, giving without expecting anything in return. Like Rishi Durvasa, fed by Draupadi's last grain, Benedict's faith created divine supply. Gayatri Japa and Sandhya Vandanam dropped pranic food for the soul. Benedict's life was a tapas not of penance, but of nurturing true spiritual strength. Pope Pelagius II faced both plague and invading armies. How do spiritual practices help a leader serve during simultaneous crisis? Crisis, test your inner stillness. Gurudev teaches when breath flows deeply, clarity emerges amidst chaos. Pelagius II continued serving even during death and disease through Sehat Samadhi meditation and Sudarshan Kriya. He accessed that calm center and offered strength to others. He reminds us of Nachiketa facing Yama yet unwavering. Trikal Sandhya kept him rooted in cosmic rhythm. Agni Karam done mentally or ritually channels purification into the collective. He didn't just lead, he prayed and protected like a rishi. Pope Gregory the First, the Great Gregory, who is one of the most influential popes, known for his writings, reforms, and deep humility. What spiritual sadhanas reflect this blend of action and surrender? Gurudev calls this dynamism rooted in silence. Gregory writings flowed from a deep meditative stillness, Sahat Samadhi meditation, Sudarshan Kriya, and Jnana Yoga refined his intellect without inflating the ego. His heart belonged to service, his actions to dharma. Gregory is like Vyasa, both a doer and a seer. Upanayana symbolizes that shift from worldly action to spiritual intent, and Sanyam Sadhana of level 1 and level 2, the practice of silence, fasting, and deep reflection would suit him. He was a karma yogi wrapped in a sage's stillness. Pope Sabinian followed Gregory the One and faced comparison and criticism. How do spiritual tools help leaders avoid the burden of comparison? Gurudev says, don't try to fill anyone's shoes, walk barefoot in your own path. Sabinian was often overshadowed, but his role mattered. Shakti Kriya builds a self confidence that is not dependent on public praise. His humility was his power, like Lakshmana living in the shadow of Rama. Sabinian quietly served. Sandhya Vandanam refines identity not based on external rules but on inner purity. He taught us that comparison is a Maya trap. Gayatri Mantra aligns us back to self effulgence. Pope Boniface III, though Pope for less than a year, Boniface secured a title of Universal Bishop for Rome. How does a short tenure still carry long lasting impact? Gurudev says the value of life is not in its length but its depth. Boniface moved with clarity and no hesitation. Sehat Samadhi meditation builds intuition and decisiveness. Even a brief life can ripple across centuries if it arises from dharma, like Bali Chakravarti, whose one offering shook all realms. Boniface's single act transformed papal history. Agnikaram reminds us one sincere offering in yajna has cosmic weight. He served like a flash of divine intent, sharp, and unforgettable. Boniface IV consecrated the pantheon to Christian worship. What does it mean spiritually to repurpose a space for higher consciousness? Gurudev says wherever the divine is invoked, space becomes sacred. Boniface saw potential where others saw history. Through mantra chanting, Padma Sadhana, and yoga, any place can become a temple. He recharged energy fields by invoking divine presence, just like converting a Shava into a Shivalinga through mantra. Boniface transformed Rome's architectural past into spiritual present. Agnikaram is not only fire but transformation. He taught us a space becomes sacred when Sankalpa and Sadhana converge. Jagadish, Pope Adeodatus I reintroduced monastic ordinations and was known for his compassion. How do spiritual traditions maintain inner discipline with outward softness? Jagadish, yes, Gurudev beautifully shows how compassion and discipline go together. Shakti Kriya builds inner fire and Sahab Samadhi meditation keeps it cool. Adodatus' revival of monastic life wasn't about rules, it was about aligning hearts with divine rhythm. He reminds me of Yudhishthira, strict yet soft. Sandhya Vandanam is both structured and flowing. He offered a return to tapasya not out of fear but love. His path brought grace to structure, the mark of a truly sattvic leader. Pope Boniface V, the Boniface V established churches as sanctuaries and promoted the idea of sacred refuge. How do spiritual practices build this refuge within us? Gurudev says, be a shelter for others first, be one for yourself. Boniface turned buildings into heavens, and we can turn breath into sanctuary. Sudarshan Kriya brings us home to our center. When we feel safe within, we naturally radiate safety outwards. Just as ashrams in ancient India protected rishis and travelers, Boniface's sanctuaries reflected dharma protection. Gayatri Mantra builds a pranic armor. He walked the path of Kshatriya, rishi protecting through presence, not sword. Pope Honorius I was later condemned for unclear theological positions. What lessons do spiritual seekers draw from being misunderstood or misinterpreted? Gurudev reminds us when you are clear inside, misunderstanding outside doesn't shake you. Honorius had deep intentions but was misread. Sahaj Samadhi meditation helps release the need to defend or justify. True seekers learn to serve without needing applause or avoidance or blame, like Karna, whose truth was buried under controversy. Honorius teaches us be sincere, not sensational. Sanyam sadhana of level 1 and level 2, a disciplined period of silence and self study, would have clarified his message more. Even in mistakes, there is evolution. He reminds us humility is the highest clarity. Jai Gurudev. So Pope Severinus faced resistance in being confirmed by the emperor. How do spiritual leaders uphold integrity when blocked by politics? Gurudev says when truth is blocked, silence speaks louder. Severinus didn't force or fight, he stood firm. Sahaj Samadhi meditation helps internalize stillness during external friction, is partly in patience, not provocation. Just like a Bhishma Pitama silently lying on the bed of arrows, Severinus waited with dignity. His stance was tapasya. Sandhya Vandanam aligns the individual with universal law. When dharma is your anchor, political tides can't shake your soul. Like with that, Pope John the Fourth carved deeply for Dalmatian Christians and built relic chapels. How does reverence for ancestors and saints enrich a society? Gurudev emphasizes the power of root spiritual memory is sacred. John Fourth preserved legacy as a form of devotion. In Padma Sadhana, each movement connects to ancient wisdom. Remembering saints uplifts collective consciousness like Pitru Tarpa nourishes the ancestral blessings. John's honoring of martyrs brought divine grace. Gayatri Japa done with Shraddha invokes Rishi consciousness. He taught remembrance as a yagya, memory when sacred becomes a bridge, not a burden. Pope Theodore I worked to unify a divided church. How can spiritual practices help leaders help ideological spirits? Gurudev says, don't try to unite minds, connect hearts first. Theodore knew unity isn't enforced, it's inspired. Sudarshan Kriya helps dissolve internal rigidity. Through breath and compassion, he created spiritual cohesion before administrative alignment. Like sage Vasistha, who mediated divine conflicts, Theodore brought clarity through prayer, Shanti Pat, Upanenam, and Trikal Sandhya activate collective harmony. His diplomacy was not cleverness, it was anchored in inner poise and spiritual authority. Pope Martin I was arrested and exiled for standing against imperial heresy. How do spiritual leaders endure persecution with dignity? Gurudev says, when you know you are doing the right thing, the world's resistance becomes your test, not your defeat. Martin didn't react, he radiated Sanyam sadhana of level 1 and level 2, and Sahaj Samadhi meditation nurtured this fearless serenity. Even exile became his temple. He is a modern Harishchandra holding dharma in chains. Agni Karyam symbolizes sacrifice without complaint. Through Gayatri Mantra, he purified not just himself but even his persecutors, his karmas. His life says, your silence can roar louder than your words. Pope Eugene I followed a persecuted predecessor. How can leaders gently re-establish hope after collective trauma? Gurudev teaches that post-trauma healing begins in the breath. Sudarshan Kriya restores prana and hence faith. Eugene's peaceful leadership smoothed wounds like a meditative presence. He didn't command, he healed. He is like Lord Dhanvantari appearing from the storm with nectar. Sandhya Vandanam clears psychological pollution just like sunrise dispels fog. Eugene's very presence felt like a Prarthana Stotra in motion. He refined and reminded Rome the soul cannot be conquered. Jagadev Pope Vitalian worked towards reconciliation with Constantinople and promoted sacred music. How does sound like music and mantra become a bridge? Gurudev says sound is the subtlest form of creation. Vitalian's love for chant and music wasn't just aesthetics, it was healing. Mantra chanting like Om Namo Narayana or Gayatri Mantra harmonizes inner dissonance. He made Rome a temple of sacred sound. Like Samaveda, Vitalian's sacred chants carried divine rhythm. Agnikaram and Shantipat invoked devatas through vibration. Music was his diplomacy even when words failed. Not united, he lived as a raga not rigid but richly resonant. Pope Adeodatus II defended monastic values and restored churches. What is the spiritual role of protecting institutions of sacred learning? Gurudev reminds us that as temples protect the sacred space, monasteries protect the sacred time. Adeodatus II restored not just buildings but memory practices like Padmasadhana and Upanayana trained minds to hold and transmit timeless values. He was a Bhagavad Seva Brahmachari protecting knowledge through tapas, Sanyam sadhana of level 1 and level 2 revives lost vibrational purity of spaces. Every monastery he touched became a Gurukula. His message: when you protect sacred knowledge protects you. Pope Donus restored East West relations and repaired buildings. What spiritual practices foster reconciliation and reconstruction? Gurudev says healing begins when judgment ends. Donus focus not on punishment but repair. Through Sudarshan Kriya and Seva, we learn to rebuild not just walls but trust. He led with repair, not rhetoric. Like Hanuman, who rebuilt Lanka's bridges even after wars, Dona's focus on mending. Sandhyavandanam removes internal rust, and Agnikaram cleanses collective karma. He lived as a karma yogi, seeing past hurt active from sattva. Pope Agatho convened a council to end theological confusion. How can spiritual leaders clarify truth without alienating differing views? Gurudev says that truth doesn't shout, it simply shines. Agatho shone with wisdom, not argument, through Sahat Samadhi meditation and Jnana Yoga. He could see from all angles. He resolved theology by raising consciousness, like Rishi Bhrigu, who saw all truths in unity. Agatho chanted inner Gayatri, seeking not who is right, but what is truth. Recalls and their alliances with the cosmic wisdom. His council was like a Rishi Sabha, a sacred convergence, not a debate. Pope Leo II confirmed Agatho's decisions and promoted plain spoken Latin preaching. How does simplicity enhance spiritual communication? Gurudev says truth is simple, complexity is of the ego. Leo's clear speech reflected inner clarity. The Pope Benedict II strengthened relations with the Eastern Church and emphasized liturgical clarity. How can spiritual leaders strengthen global harmony through clear ritual and language? Gurudev says rituals are symbolic steps to the infinite. When done with clarity, they unite cultures. Benedict II used liturgy like a bridge. Art of Living uses global techniques like Sudarshan Kriya and Sahat Samadhi meditation, simple yet universally impactful through breath, sound, and stillness. Barriers fail. Benedict II is like a Vedic Hutra. His rituals weren't mechanical, they were mindful. Agnikaram done with clarity purifies not just the fire, but also intention. His outreach to Constantinople echoes Sandhya Vandanam, a personal act with cosmic resonance. Clarity in ritual reflects clarity in purpose. Pope John V had a short but generous papacy, showing care for clergy and poor. How can compassion and brevity leave a lasting spiritual legacy? Gurudev teaches it's not how long you live, but how deep you live that matters. John V served like a spiritual surgeon, precise and compassionate. Through seva, sudarshan kriya, and meditation, we awaken this depth in our everyday lives. His papacy was short, but left long vibrations. He exemplified dana dharma, giving not out of obligation, but out of oneness. In Gayatri Japa, we chant for all beings, not just ourselves. John V's leadership was like a yagya that burns bright even in brief. His generosity was his immortality. Jagrudev Pope Canon united diverse factions with simplicity and kindness. How does spiritual softness overcome institutional rigidity? Jagadev, yes, Gurudev says softness is not weakness, it is strength in its most refined form. Kanan won hearts, not debate. Shakti Kriya channels strength inwardly, making one resilient yet soft. He led not from ego but from sympathy, and that melted walls. Like Valmiki, once hardened by karna, softened by mantra and tapas, Kanan healed division with warmth. Sanyam sadhana of level 1 and level 2 teaches us to listen deeply and act wisely. His papacy was a lived sutra, simple, connecting, and unbreakable. Simplicity is the highest sophistication in dharma. The Pope Sergius one introduced the Agnus Dei Lamb of God chant. How can sacred symbols and sounds elevate human consciousness? Gurudev often reminds us symbolism is the language of the soul. Agnus Dei is no different from chanting Om Namah Shivaya. It involves surrender, purity, and divine love through Padma Sadhana and chanting. We align with that innocence. Sergius taught us to cry, not shout to the divine. Agnes Dei parallels Pashupata Yoga, the soul as a gentle lamb surrendered to Shiva. Trikals and the Anupananam train the seeker to recognize themselves as vessels of compassion. Sergius chanted not to impress but to uplift. His chant still reverberates through time. Pope John the Sixth used diplomacy over force during Byzantine tensions. How do spiritual practices cultivate peace over aggression? Gurudev says only a calm mind can solve a stormy problem. John the Sixth embodied this principle. Sehat Samadhi meditation silences reactivity and activates intuition. He knew when not to act. True leadership diplomacy flowed from his silence, not his strategy. John the Sixth was like Krishna in the Sabha, gentle yet firm. Sandhya Vandanam done thrice daily infuses calm in decision making. Even emperors respond to spiritual stillness. His dharma wasn't dominance, it was a samadrishti equanimity that dissolves hostility. Jai Gurudev.